Imagine 12 million people. That's more than the entire population of modern-day London, forcibly taken from their homes, families torn apart, and shipped across an ocean in chains. This was the reality of the Atlantic slave trade, one of humanity's darkest chapters that spanned over 400 years. The story begins in the 15th century, when Portuguese ships first arrived on the West African coast. What started as a trade in gold and ivory soon transformed into something far more sinister. European traders discovered they could make enormous profits by trafficking human beings across the Atlantic Ocean. By 1600, the slave trade had become a complex, multinational enterprise. European ships would arrive on African shores laden with goods, textiles, weapons, metal tools, and trinkets. They would exchange these items with local leaders and merchants for captured people, often prisoners of war or victims of raids from neighboring regions. The journey that followed was known as the Middle Passage, a horrific voyage across the Atlantic that defies description. Captured Africans were packed into ships like cargo, chained together in spaces so tight they could barely move. Disease spread rapidly, and the death rate was staggering. Up to 15% of captives didn't survive the crossing. Those who lived through the journey faced a lifetime of bondage in the Americas. They were sold at auction blocks, separated from whatever family members had survived with them, and forced to work on plantations, mines, and in households. Their labor built the foundations of the American economy, particularly in cotton, sugar, and tobacco production. But this is not just a story of victimization. It's also a tale of remarkable resistance. Enslaved Africans fought back in countless ways. They staged rebellions on ships and plantations, maintained their cultural traditions despite brutal suppression, and created new forms of music, art, and language that would profoundly influence global culture. One of the most famous acts of resistance occurred in 1839 aboard the Spanish ship La Amistad. The captured Africans, led by Sengbe Pié, successfully overthrew their captors. As Pié later declared in court, "All we want is to make us free." The scale of the slave trade transformed both Africa and the Americas. Entire African kingdoms rose and fell based on their involvement in the trade. Communities were devastated, demographic patterns altered, and traditional social structures disrupted. In the Americas, the forced migration created new societies and lasting racial hierarchies. The trade's impact extends far beyond its official abolition. It shaped modern economics, politics, and social structures across 4 continents. The wealth generated by enslaved labor funded the Industrial Revolution and built many of Europe's great cities. Meanwhile, the African continent was depleted of millions of its youngest and strongest people during crucial centuries of global development. Today, the legacy of the Atlantic slave trade continues to influence our world. It's visible in persistent economic inequalities, in cultural connections between Africa and the Americas, and in ongoing struggles for racial justice. Understanding this history is crucial for comprehending modern global challenges and working toward a more equitable future. The numbers are staggering: 12 million people forced from their homes, countless lives lost at sea, generations born into bondage, and centuries of accumulated wealth built on human suffering. Yet, within this dark history, we also find extraordinary stories of survival, resistance, and the unquenchable human spirit. These stories remind us that while we cannot change the past, we must understand it to build a better future. This history isn't just about numbers and dates, it's about people. People who loved, dreamed, fought, and persevered against unimaginable odds. Their story is our story, and its echoes still resonate in our world today.